So I'm Nicholas Davenport. You might also know me as Mr. Mental Muscle. And we're here at my facility, Mind Body One, here in Deerfield Beach. And we have Milani Whitaker. She introduce herself.
Hi, guys. I'm Milani Whitaker, creator of Power in Humanity. And yeah, excited for this conversation.
We actually met about a year ago, almost a year and a month or so. I think it was June last year at a group mental fitness class. And basically, I reached out because I was like, hey, we're doing a lot of similar stuff. And I'm like, we could talk about some things. She came by, talked for like a good hour and a half. That low-key should have been recorded in itself. But hey, now we got it going. So now we can do it on camera.
That's true. And we can dive even deeper.
So what you got? You got some topics. I think they're pretty good. So let's go through.
Let's go through it. Okay. So I have 2 topics. I'm going to let you choose, but okay. You have to choose either 1 or 2.
Okay.
What do you choose?
Oh, it's a mystery. Oh,
yeah, it's a mystery. So you get to choose what we start with, but you don't know which is which.
Okay. So I was number 2 for a while in sports, so I'm gonna go with 2.
And number 2, okay. The spectrum of success.
That's actually the one I like that you had told me earlier. So cool. The spectrum of success.
The spectrum of success.
It is success.
Exactly. And it's funny because I always think that people go up to other people and they're chasing this thing called success, or they work so hard to be successful. And no one really defines what success is, right? Like no one's told, okay, if you go out in the world and make this much money and have this many houses, then you're successful. But you know, I see success as just being happy, and other people don't see it that way. So what would you say your definition of success is?
So I'm a very succinct, straight to the point person. This is my, and most people are gonna disagree with me probably because I'm basic like that. But my definition is whatever you set the goal to be, and if you do that said goal, you're successful.
Okay.
Now that could be subjective to so many things, as simple as get off the sofa to own $1 million business. But if your goal is X and you get to X, you're by my definition successful. So like I said, most people might not agree with me on that, but hey, that's how I look at it.
That's true. That's true. And do you think success is something that's, what word do I want to use? Like life success. Like what would you define as life success based on or versus situational success?
Well, life, I hate to go back to that definition I just used, but I'll get a little more broader with it. Like people look at life success as what type of job, career, income, family. So those things could look a lot of different ways. But I think to get to that point, to achieve it and what that looks like is you putting yourself through the work, the endeavors that get you to that point, because nothing, whether it's big time success or just passing a class, it takes some kind of structured goal and a route that you have to constantly persist on, because a lot of times people get deterred because they don't happen on day one. So to get to that ultimate success, you got to understand there's going to be a lot of, I use the word cumulative ups and downs that are going to add up to the bigger goal.
That's true. And that's something I started doing, like a wellness workshop. And I tell people all the time, like, dreams are wishes. Like you can't control your dream, but you can control your goal, right? And as long as you're working towards that goal and you have your daily practices set and you're following those daily practices and reaching them, like eventually you're going to get somewhere, right? And then those daily practices will turn into like your short-term goals, and you'll just start reaching your goals and turn into habits, and your life will kind of like snowball effect, but in a positive way, right? And a lot of people think of success as just, okay, well, I want this, so I'm going to go out and either buy it or, you know, tap a button and like, you know what I mean? Like everything is such instant gratification.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. People are so focused on instant gratification that they lose track of what their goals even are. Like they don't even know what it takes to reach their goals or be successful. They just know like, okay, well, I want this and I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I want it and it should just come to me.
Well, you kind of got to blame your brain and evolutionary psychology, because our brain wants to take the simplest route to get anywhere, whether it be physically or mentally. So it's like we were wired for that, because in ancient times, it made more sense just to do the simplest, shortest way to survive. But now we have the luxury of a safer world, I'll say. It's not perfect, but it's safer. So now that it kind of hurts us, because of going back to what you said with instant gratification. If we don't get it instantly, now our brain says, hey, man, this needs to be simple. Just stop. Just do the simpler thing. And let's be real, that's usually what happens. You probably have friends, families, associates that you see, how do you give up so easy? It's like, well, it didn't work out. Maybe it was the first try, maybe it was the 15th try, but it depends. Whatever that goal is, some goals only take a few tries. Something simple like, say, I want to maybe get in shape. That's going to take a month or two, maybe 3, maybe a year. But say be a successful business person or whatever, that might take a decade.
Right.
And a lot of people don't, I guess the first step is understanding what that goal, like I said, the goals or wishes, whatever you want to call it, you need to understand what they even is comprised of, right?
Right. 100%. Because like you just mentioned, I want to be a successful business person. Everybody has their own definition of like what a successful business person is, right? Like whether it's a certain amount of revenue coming in, whether it's a certain number of like the profit coming in, right? Because revenue and profit aren't always the same thing. Like it could be the amount of clientele, it can be the partnerships that you have. And it's so hard really tuning in and defining like what you think success is, because there's so many different meanings of it, right? And even like every different field has a different measure of success, or like what a successful business would look like, you know?
Yeah, people get stuck on outcomes because outcome goals, like you said, like there's a certain level of control you have, but then there's a certain level you don't. And I think outcomes, you have to have them. You need to know what the end should look like. When I finish this endeavor, this task, this is what should happen. Cool. But after that, reverse engineer and see what are the processes day to day, week to week, month to month. Because people always talk about, because it's more glamorous, like going back to success. It looks better to know when I finish X, Y, and Z, I'll have the money, or I'll have the wins, or I'll have whatever product or insert outcome goal. But they never look at, okay, get up at 6 a.m. or going to back to business. Understand that you're probably going to invest tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to make one product. Because I'm glad you said profit versus revenue, because a lot of people who get into entrepreneurship, they don't look at revenue. And my favorite rap group, Outkast, Big Boy had a line on the song. He said, it's not how much you make, it's how much you spend. And look at the biggest businesses. Most of them, Amazon, Apple, they have huge payrolls. They have huge R&D departments where they're spending billions of dollars to make trillions. Now, that's obviously the big extreme, but someone like, say, us, who are a small growing business, that could look in a similar way, like you spend tens of thousands to make hundreds of thousands, but how many people want to spend tens of thousands with zero return for a year, 2 years, sometimes 5 years?
Yeah.
It ain't for everyone.
Yeah. And it takes a certain, I don't know if it's drive. You mentioned resiliency a lot. Like, I don't know what it is that separate the big businesses from the small businesses, right? Like what even defines like being able to keep spending money? Okay, I'm going to spend $10,000 on this. I'm going to spend $50,000 on this just to make hundreds of thousands back. Like, I wonder what it is that, like the mindset that you have to have. I think maybe that's it. Because it's a different mindset.
Well, it goes back to what you said with delayed gratification. That's one part, being able to hold off, but it's also being able to walk into something that has a high failure rate. Like most people are risk adverse, especially with finances. Like most people would rather say, I'm going to save this money just so I can know I have something for a rainy day or whatever. And as an entrepreneurship, you still have to have some sort of consciousness of like saving, but at the same time, you do have to, because I'll give you a real life anecdote from my own life that I worked with a company and I was a consultant. They paid me a monthly salary to do what I do with mental performance and cognitive performance for their business. And basically they were worth hundreds of millions. So watching how they operated, and I was very cool with the CEO, and basically he would like sometimes vent to me, and some of the problems he was telling me were things I was going through, and going to the point of saying, what is the difference between the big billion-trillion-dollar businesses like Apple and Amazon versus someone like us who are trying to get to the bigger goals? It's like the only difference is that they just have bigger risks and bigger losses, but they still have the same risks and same losses that we do. It's just bigger. So that made me actually feel good. And anyone who's watching, who's in some kind of endeavor, whether it's business, school, life, got to understand there is people, if you're an athlete, there's pros who are going through what you're going through. It's just at a bigger scale. It doesn't mean, oh, how could I get like the top pros? Yeah, you're probably going through what they're going through, and going back to business is like the success we talk about. All these people went through what you're going through. So that put me at ease personally, because he was saying literally, oh, we have to put in X amount of millions for this new endeavor, this new project they're working on. But if it went through how it's supposed to, they'll make that back tenfold. But there's a possibility that it might not go anywhere. And with us, we do the same thing, right? You take trips to maybe meet someone and network and get a potential partnership, and it could go great and you get it, or you don't. And now you just spent maybe $500 to $1,000 on the trip for maybe 2 days out your week, you could have been doing something else.
Right.
But that's the thing, going back to the original point is most people aren't willing to do that. And that's why they're like, why aren't more people getting, quote unquote, like you said, I'll use finger quotes too, success.
It's success. I think success, it always deserves a finger quote. But there is another thing that you mentioned, the reverse engineering, which is super important. In even like the risk factors that we were just talking about, like it's hard to backtrack and, talking about reverse engineering from setting a goal. Okay, I want this goal. Now, what are the steps that I'm going to take to reach it? Or I'm going to take this risk. Now, if I do X, Y, and Z, it's going to come back tenfold. But if I do A, B, and C, it's not. Like the planning process of it is something that, I don't know, like how did you figure out how to reverse engineer?
See, with me, I'm weird because, in a good weird, like, I like to call myself weird in a good way because it's like I like to look at things like, say, reverse engineer. So I like to start from the end. When I used to make music back in the day, I would write the end of the song first and say, how do I want to finish this? And then I'll start it. So I do the same thing. So whether it's training my clients like athletes, military, or where it's consulting, doing mental coaching, I always think is, where should they be at the end of this? And I think that's the easiest part. Most people can think of how to end it or how to win it or whatever. I want to win this much, or I want to get this much money. I want to get this much, a degree, whatever it is. But it's always the hardest part is how we get there. So going back to that, it's like I always looked at it as, okay, what are the steps? So I look at people, a lot of people do this, they look at the people who've already done it. But I think where I differ from most people is I don't just look at the wins that example person has. I look at their losses too. Because I personally think the losses tell me a better story. Because yeah, work hard, stay consistent. We already both said that. That's part of it. Obviously, we all need to be consistent because you can't get anywhere if you stop. But at the same time, what if things go wrong? Do you know how to adapt? So if I look at their failures or their losses, I know now, okay, these are potential things that could happen that I should account for. So I know to implement things that either can negate those hindrances or maybe even purposely put myself in a chance where that hindrance could happen just so I can either, one, get it out the way. Because I hate to say it, for those who want to go into entrepreneur, I think that's kind of been the theme of this, because success and entrepreneurship go hand in hand, or the goals of it. But it's like, if you're going to go into this business, don't go into it think it's going to go to A to B without any hitches. I think that's another thing. I had one business partner that we're no longer associated, and he was the opposite of me. He was like, I don't want to do it unless I know we're getting something out of it. That you can't look at as a business owner to any level. You have to understand there's going to be projects, endeavors that will cost you money. You get 0 clients, 0 leads. It's not because you want to fail. I'm not saying go out there, yes, I want to fail, but it's more like, understand that's going to happen. So when it does, you're ready. Because let's talk about back the mental side. We're human. We get deterred when things don't go our way. I'm not saying don't get down. I get down, you get down, we get down. But just know that it's not like a bad thing. Like you don't hope for it, but just know, that's like with sports. I like to use sports. We both are athletes. Like when you lose a game, do you quit the team? Like some people do, I'm sure, but is that going to be someone who's going to be a better athlete? Same thing with business. I'm not going to have a bad week, bad month, bad year even. I've had years where I made 0 or even owed money going back. And I have years when I made profit, and it's fluctuated both now and back when I started. So it's not like, oh, Nick, you're at a better point. Now you're good to go. It's like, nah, I still have those same problems. It's just now I'm at least better equipped to accommodate them. So that's why I think you really got to be ready for those hindrances and almost not, I don't want to say wish for them, but be optimistic that, hey, these can happen, so let me get ready.
Right. Like prepare yourself before it happens. And like I did pretty much the same thing. Like, okay, where do I want to be? What do I want the end goal to be? And how do I get there? And I think a lot of the times when I was overcoming the hindrances and preparing for the hindrances, one way that I kind of prepared myself for them was to look at them differently, right? Like you said, there are going to be times where you put like $200 into a project and expect like 500 back. But there are also times where you put maybe 500 into a project and get nothing back, right? And some people will consider that a failure, like right off the bat, but just doing it for the experience, right? And like seeing what it's like. And I know I put together like a book signing event just to see like, okay, well, what is a budget? Like, what do I actually need? How would I run it in the future? Like if my budget got bigger, which is the goal, like, you know, how would I work with that money? Just doing it as like a test run. And I think a lot of people aren't, I don't know if they get focused in the wrong thing. Would you say that people get focused in the wrong thing? Maybe.
They want the highlights of entrepreneurship versus I'm not saying you don't want those. I want those too. I want to be on a yacht chilling one day, but I want to also know that, like you said, you got to expect that there will be times where this is not going to look how you want it.
Right. Right. In my head, the first thing, it was like cosmetic. People want like the cosmetic business that looks good on the internet and is like pretty to the eye. It looks good on paper. But I think the best entrepreneurs don't do it for like the money or the fame or anything else. They just do it for the experience and like the process of it all.
They want to solve problems. A true entrepreneur should be a problem solver. Like, the money is a byproduct, because obviously once you find your solution, you're going to monetize it. That's obviously what a business does. But like you said, they don't do it for the sake of like, yeah, I'm going to make millions one day. Of course, it's the process to get there. But the fact that if you find a solution, like, let's just use a perfect example. Henry Ford gets talked about a lot, and he's always associated with the invention of the car, which is not true. He didn't invent the car. Matter of fact, there's been numerous motor vehicles that preceded Henry Ford. Actually, one of them was named Carl Benz, and you probably heard that name before, Mercedes-Benz. So he's actually noted for the first modern car in like 1887 or something like that. So off of Carl Benz back to Henry Ford. But his real claim to fame is what most people confuse with him inventing the car. He didn't invent it, but his innovation was he said, let's make interchangeable parts for the cars. Because back in those days, once it broke down, you had this big clunk of machine, it was done. But he said, okay, we have different parts we can interchange when they break or malfunction. Then we can just keep the same base car and now just change out the parts. So think about the cars we have right now, right? So if your brake pads go out, you can change the brake pads. If your engine has some problem, you can change parts of the engine. So that's where his money was made. And then he revolutionized how the production of the car was made with the assembly line. He didn't invent the assembly line, but he was like, let's take these aspects. And that's what a true entrepreneur is. They're not necessarily an innovator. You could be, but they're more so taking innovative like ideas of things that already exist. And that's what people, I think, should do, is find out what you want to, it doesn't have to be major like that either. It could be like, okay, I know people need shirts. So let's go something very basic. And it's true. Most people need clothes. You shouldn't, or you get in trouble if you walk outside without clothes on. But basically, you know, that's a need. Now, it's not going to necessarily change the world in I invented the first automated whatever, but it's like, I know people need shirts. I found a supplier. I got a good price. I sell these shirts. They don't have to be designer. It could literally just be white shirts. You know what I mean? And it seems so mundane, but you know, it's funny. The most, like the richest people, those are the type of businesses that are making the most money. The ones that they make one little simple thing. But matter of fact, I'll give you another side note to the side note. We talked last time. I have a lot of these stories, but I was at the gas station a few years back, and I was pumping my gas, and I was just in the car. I don't know why I was sitting there, but I was waiting for something, I guess a text, to decide where I was going to go to a client or something. So an ice truck, like bags of ice, pulls up, and I see him unload all the ice into the machine where they lock the ice bags at the gas station. I'm like, wait, never thought about that. There's actually companies that supply this, and it's ice.
True.
It's ice. You can go to your refrigerator, press a little thing, get ice, but that's actually an industry, and it's nothing glamorous about that. Like, I think going back to what we said, the cosmetics, everybody wants to be the next Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, the thing that changes the world. But I guarantee whoever owns, I don't remember the name of the company, it was on the truck, but whoever owns that company or companies or whatever that stocks the ice at all these gas stations, they're probably billionaires.
That's true.
Now, us, we're a little different. Our industries is a little more like, it does require a little more creativity and innovation because it's a different aspect. So we chose, I guess, that route. But I would say if you just want to be an entrepreneur, find a solution that you care about to some degree. And you don't have to care. Honestly, I doubt that guy's like, all my life I wanted to be an ice salesman or ice supplier. He might have. I doubt it. So yeah, so maybe they should, like you said, I like that word, cosmetic, the cosmetic aspect of business or success, because honestly, it's usually the simple, basic things that get you there.
That's true. And even thinking with clothes, like it's the little like cuts and lines that like one company does that no one else does. And everyone's like, oh, I want that one, you know? Do you think that it takes like a certain personality type to be an entrepreneur?
Yes, definitely. You have to be very conscientiousness. So high on that. Those who aren't familiar with that, that's being goal oriented, some form of perfectionism to a degree, not too much. You need to be able to be diligent, like not giving up, obviously. Very, very low on neuroticism, because people who don't know neuroticism, that's people who are highly stressed. That people who are high on neuroticism typically just lose their minds when things don't go their way. So you need to be very low on that personality trait. So conscientiousness, that's being diligent, goal oriented, low neuroticism, being more so not averse to risk or anxious anxiety. And then also extroversion in the sense of something we call social boldness, which is being able to lead, take charge of a group, and be able to have social interactions that you're able to thrive off them, because someone who's low on intro or extroversion will typically be depleted by social interaction. So if you are introverted, you still could be an entrepreneur, but just be mindful of you have to do some level of social interaction and networking, because there's a post that's going like viral meme, and I shared it, and it was like, stop getting mad when your friends and family aren't showing support. Just keep going and doing what you do. And I added on the caption on my post, I said, strangers are the only people who can make you millionaires. That was my like takeaway from that meme, because it's like strangers, honestly, like think about that. They're the only ones, because even if your family and friends did want to support you fully, how much money can they really put into your business? So by proxy, you have to make strangers your priority, because these are ones, there's endless amounts of them. And I think we make mistakes as entrepreneurs when we don't get that and be like, oh, my family, friends. So going back to personality, is like, you got to be able to say, it's okay, be extroverted to some degree, get out there, network, shake hands, call, text, Instagram. We have so many means now, right? That's literally how we met in person, but we reconnected through social media. So I think I saw one of your posts. I'm like, hey, let me hit you up. It's been like a year since we met and whatever. So I wanted to follow up because you emailed me back in, I think, December, and I think I missed that. Then I hit you back, so we were playing tag.
And then I missed that.
Exactly. So we're literally sitting here because we had to step out. Like, I'm a very introverted person outside of what I love. I'm extroverted for this stuff, but outside of this, I'm to myself, I'm low key. But I understood that at a young age, like, you got to get out there and put yourself in a position, because if no one can see you, you can't sell what you're pushing or get your service or whatever or content out there.
Exactly. And I was always thinking about it this way, like, there are billions of people in the world. Like, your family and friends make up maybe like 100, 200.
If you're that social, I feel like that's a pretty social person to have that many like acquaintances that will really look out and support, which is good if they do. But let's say even if you say your product or service is very high quality, premium service, and it's like $5,000. So if those 200 people all support it for $5,000, you'll make a good little chunk of change.
That's true.
But it ends there. You're not going to keep buying it. Like, you know what I mean? So having the millions of people that are possible customers, like you talk about business market share, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs either overestimate the market share or underestimate it. Like, they underestimate it, they don't realize there's bigger size to the market, so you can actually branch out further. And they only put this niche group, like I work with sports psychologist students who just graduate, and I consult with them or just drop some knowledge if they ask. And I tell them, you got to look beyond athletes, because sadly, athletes, especially youth, they don't have money. It's usually their parents paying for it. And if they're higher level, they're broke college students. If they're pros, they want it free. So guess what? Your market share is too small. I found most of my revenue coming from corporate wellness, law enforcement. I've done some stuff with military. I still work with athletes, but I found like the business needs to stay open for me to work with anyone, right? And then the other side is they have the too big market share. Everyone's my client. I can work with everybody. True, but how many people can you really get if you're shooting for all these different targets? So yeah, knowing your market, either knowing how big it could be and expanding, or knowing that you need to narrow it down, is very key too.
Wow. I never even thought about it like that.
Yeah, I've learned this through trial and error. Trust me, I didn't wake up one day and just knew this. I learned it from, because I went too broad early, and I was trying to work with everyone. And then I narrowed it down, and I focused strictly on cognitive performance for athletes for about 3 years. And that was my claim to fame, because I was doing other things before that, but it's like, this is what got me. And I said, okay, my market's too big. I need to narrow it back down. And that got me more notoriety, and I got to work with top performers. I got to be on ESPN and all these other platforms. And then when I finally got solidified, I got opportunities to go into the corporate world, and I actually leveraged that. And that's the beauty. You can leverage other markets as an upsell, because people always talk about like testimonials and stuff. And I argue testimonials are cool. I have them, but I feel a person who can just show the anecdotal experiences they've had goes so much further. Because if I sit in front of city managers, CEOs, you name it, sheriffs, all that stuff. And when I can say, insert, like I work with a guy named Dustin Poirier, he's a top UFC fighter. It's not to say the name drop really, it's more so to say the experience from this person. I'll use him only because with, like, say, my law enforcement, it has some carryover, because while they're not like fighting criminals and everything, like fighting crime, but it's like they have to have that same mindset of a fighter, and that they like it from that perspective. Yeah, he's famous, that's cool, but they like that. Same thing with my military. So that anecdotal experience with Dustin actually carried over to a marketing standpoint from these other contracts, and vice versa. Let's say I work with corporate wellness. I can use that with other team organizations like sports and say, hey, I work with a corporation. They run their businesses like this. So I can implement those concepts with your team. So I think that's what people in our field should look at too, is understand that your market can be grown by going to things outside of sports when it comes to like sports or performance psychology, because they get so pigeonholed with, I want to work with just athletes, but there's only so many athletes and most of them aren't really able to afford your service.
Right. And that's a really good point because, yeah, mental health and athletics, like people are already paying for the sports and they're paying for like the privates and they're paying for the extra lessons and conditioning classes. And then you get to college and you're not paying for anything. Like when you go to college and you play a sport, like everything is given to you, like the clothes, travel, the food. And then once you get to a professional level or outside, it's like the population decreases a whole lot after college because compared to college, there are not that many athletes go pro.
Nope.
And then getting the athletes that do go pro, like one, they have managers who have people. So like it's gone. Yeah. And like being resilient enough to like expand and contract your, the population you want to work with is important. Yeah. And we did personality types in entrepreneurship. What about, do you think it takes like a certain personality type to be an athlete?
Oh yeah. It's
like
almost,
compared to entrepreneur?
It's almost the same things. Honestly, think about it, because you're an athlete, I'm an athlete. Let's go with the most cliche one. Never giving up, being consistent. You have to be that in entrepreneurship. You have to be that as an athlete. So that goes back to that conscientiousness. Like you have to be able to say, this is my goal. If it gets moved off tilt, I still need to figure out how to keep going. Because going back to what we said previously, it's going to happen. You're going to have a game where you do your best and you still lose. Like, so you did competitive cheer.
Correct.
And what else?
And acrobatics.
So I think that's because, so we both can relate to this. And so I'm a track guy. I played football, obviously, but track was like, I actually like track better. So going back to competitive cheering, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a big knowledgeable of this sport, but I understand that there's a lot of like subjectiveness to the scoring sometimes.
Yes.
So that's why I want to use that, because with track, it's very objective. I run faster or jump further. You can maybe argue. No, I don't really think there's a way to mess that up. But going to cheer, it's subjective of, was this routine judged better? So imagine on video, you watch it back like, we did everything flawlessly. We've never performed that clear and clean. But then you get a lesser score than a team that didn't. And it's like, wait, what? So that has to build some kind of resilience, because now it's like, I did my best, technically better than I've ever done, our team has ever done, and we still lost. You have to be diligent there, so.
That's true. That's very true. And it is super frustrating because there are even times where it'll just be the judge. Like you'll do the same exact thing or like even do the same thing better, but depending on who judges it, you might get like a lower score before. And you're like, wait, that one was worse. Like I did the other one better. It felt better. So that's very true. And even like being able to, I guess you can attest to this in football, like fall every practice. I feel like that was maybe one of my hardest challenges. Like every single practice, you're going to fall. There without a doubt, like you're going to fall on your face. It's going to hurt. And you have to get back up. And I think that that's something that's helped me in business become resilient, because it's like, okay, I know that adversities are going to happen, challenges are going to happen, hindrances are going to happen. But I just wondered because, I've worked with cheerleaders, gymnasts, tumblers, but I've never worked with anyone who's done sports that you've done. Like I never played track. I never really studied people who did any other sports. So I always wonder if it's the same for all athletes or if it's just my sport.
I think there's some commonalities for every sport, like the general stuff, like going back to that mental toughness, staying focused, bouncing back from adversity. Those are always I think every sport has to have, that's obvious. But I think some aspects are different, because going to say like a team sport, even to an individual sport, because track, I did that's an individual sport, but I also played baseball and football, which are team sports. And I can tell you, I was a different person in each one, because as a track athlete, I was a little more selfish, because even though as a team you can win because of the points for each player or runner, but I was more worried about, okay, I jumped furthest, I ran fastest, I won my events, cool. Like, does the team win overall? Sure, well, maybe not. But I got what I needed. But football is the opposite. I would do anything regardless so my team could win. Or if we lost, I would still put in that same. So it's like that right there is different because you have different stakes. Like as a football player, if I miss my assignment, you can still maybe have a good play. Like, let's say I was supposed to block this. Well, I was a defensive back, so I didn't play on offense. But say a receiver is supposed to block somebody and they don't do it, that person running the ball might still be able to score. But in an individual sport, if you mess up, there's no really excuse after that. You're just done because it's only you. So I think that's where it might differ, that you have to be more open. So that's a personality trait, agreeableness, that a lot of people, I think agreeableness gets misconstrued. It's not supposed to be like, because people say, oh, it's more like being a pushover because you typically go with the flow. And I wouldn't say it's really that. It's more so being concerned with others in your group. So someone who's high on agreeableness probably would do better as a team sport athlete because they're going to understand I have to be open to other thoughts, other people's emotions, other people's play and skill, versus with an independent or individual sport is more like, I don't have to be as agreeable because I just need to do what I need to do and get what I need, honestly. So yeah, these are good questions because looking at the personality side of sport, I don't think it's talked about at all, really, at least to this degree, because it's usually like, if it is psychological, it's more so just mental toughness. And I love talking about mental toughness like anyone else, but I think all these things we're covering make up the mental toughness as a whole versus just saying you got to be, you don't. It's like, nah, these personality traits have to be known and observed to see how mentally tough or resilient someone is. So you got to know all this stuff, I believe.
Right. And it's funny because when I used to do competitive cheer, I would always keep in mind and like watch around, because in cheerleading, you usually like stick with the same gym. And like when you're in the same gym, like you see the same athletes on the same teams or like with the same coaches leveling up. And there's usually like a progress that they go through, like levels 1 through now 7, right? And you kind of see different athletes from the time they were like maybe little teeny tots on like the 3-year-old team until they're like 18. So that's a 15-year span. And you have generally the same coaches working with them, and just watching certain athletes develop and move from like certain teams to other teams, or even watching athletes who may be a good athlete on one team, not be a good athlete on another team, or working with different people. It's always made me think like, okay, one, how are these teams put together? Like, why put someone on a team who maybe isn't the strongest or isn't the best, but has like a good energy field? You know what I mean? And during my time as an athlete, like sometimes I was that person, like, okay, you may not have all the skills, but you have leadership skills, or you're able to conceptualize what we're doing and explain it to everyone, you know, and just having different personality types on the team for the bigger goal. You know what I mean? And that may even go to like the agreeableness and different personality types that you have, and wanting maybe would you say you would want all the personality types on one team, or like picking and choosing certain personality types to be on certain teams?
Yeah. So get into like, like type theory versus trait theory. So I would say technically you would have all those personalities because everyone has some level of all. Think of it like a scale, from 0, not at all, you completely not it. Well, no one's a 0, right? But let's start at 0 and then 100, completely whatever trait. So out of the big 5-factor model, there's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So it's like going with what you were just saying. Some people have that leadership ability. They're able to take charge, guide. So I would say that's a person probably high in extroversion, higher in conscientiousness, being able to lead, goal-oriented. But you probably have some level of neuroticism. Like you're still going to have apprehensions and doubts, but you probably, let's say you're a 30 and someone else might be a 70. Do you want that person who's a 70 on neuroticism who freaks out anything goes wrong as your leader? Probably not. So it's like, I would say, yes, everyone has those traits and all those traits will show up, but you made a good point. You need to be able to put them in the places. I guess that's the takeaway I take from what you said was perfect, was you need to put them in the places where it makes sense for the team. Because that person's high on neuroticism, they have a role. Like you need some caution. You can have every player like go and don't think about the risk. Because in a sport, that can mean the team failing, that can mean injury, it can mean a lot of bad things. So you do need that person who's going to be more cautious of the risks. But then you need someone who is going to take that charge and take that chance. So you do want to have a balance of all of that. But I think that's the hard part, coaches, because obviously we are in this field. So most coaches don't know this stuff. And I'm not saying they have to get a dang PhD in psychology, but they should understand at minimal these traits, because they can identify them when they're either recruiting as a college or even highest pros could take this into consideration. I don't know if they do, or they probably do some form of it. I would hope they put millions of dollars into these guys, right? But from the youth level, that's probably the level you work with the most or know about the most, and I work with a lot, is if you can simply just understand if Jimmy or Lisa, whoever, they tend to get frustrated when things don't go their way, you can coach them better now. Because now you know, instead of just getting, Jimmy, why are you always freaking out? Instead, like, okay, let me understand, okay, I have to come at, not say you coddle them or baby them, but you come at them in a way that makes sense for their learning or their personality type.
Right. So that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, so these things I think are very key. Any coach can benefit from knowing the surface. They don't, like I say, they don't have to get deep into it, but they know the surface value of these things. I guarantee their coaching will improve because now they know, one, where to put the players or the athletes, and two, how to coach these athletes. Because not everyone's going to respond to, Johnny, just go out there and do it. That person, like you said, like yourself, you probably can respond to that because you take charge, you take initiative. Some people aren't going to do that. So you need to not necessarily hold their hand, but you got to kind of guide them more. Because I think most coaches just throw every kid into the just take charge and do it. And if they don't, they see them as a bad athlete. And it's like, no, maybe they just need to be understood. And then guess what? If you're 7 to say 12 years old, this might deter you to keep playing. You might have been the next superstar, but because you mentally got booted out because the coach thought you were too weak or too soft, it's like, maybe you just need to understand how to coach me. And I'm putting that, like, people might argue with me like, oh, you need to toughen them up. And it's like, yeah, they need to be tough. I'm not saying that, but understand what you're doing. Like, there's things that are very valuable in this world that could break. Do you sit there and say, nah, I'm just going to let them do what they do and they're fragile? No, you're going to make sure you take, right? You're going to take care of it, and hopefully it can get to where it needs to be. But
exactly. And I was definitely that athlete. Like, my coach is like, if you yell and scream and, like, you know, fuss at me, I'll probably just like, okay, yeah. Like, I'm not going to blow up back, but I'm definitely not going to do what you say. But, you know, with instruction, you know, and every athlete is definitely different. It's definitely different. Okay. So phasing out of athletics, like, what was that like for you?
For me being an athlete?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I was like you. I was a type that a coach could chew me out. I could mess up. I would easily get over it. Not because I just was impenetrable to, like, defeat. Like, I didn't know none of this stuff when I was a teenager or even a young kid athlete. I just, for some reason, my mindset was at least somewhat like this. It looked like, okay, if I messed up, maybe I need to figure out how to be better. I didn't know what that exactly looked like at 7 years old or 12 years old, but I knew I had to figure it out. And low key, I would. And I'm 34, so I grew up when the internet was really starting to kick off. So I would go online, and we had something called AskJeeves.com. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah, I feel old now. I'm playing. But so Ask Jeeves was one of the many search engines. So Google came out, I think, in 2000 or 98, but it wasn't like what it is now. But there was one, Yahoo was one, Bing was one. But Ask Jeeves was cool because it had a commercial, and it was like a cartoon butler. And that was like, as a kid, that I was like, oh, that's cool. So you would literally ask, well, on the commercial, they would literally ask a full-on question. Now we just type in the keywords, right? But I would literally type, hey, Jeeves, how do I run faster? Hey, Jeeves, how do I jump further? Hey, Jeeves. And he would bring all these articles that at the time I didn't realize were like peer-reviewed exercise science journals and pages. And I'm reading these at like 12, 13 years old, barely understanding plyometric exercise has shown that dynamic rate of force development. Mind you, I'm 12, 13 years old. I'm a little kid still. So I'm reading these, but what I could understand, I tried to replicate, and I did. And funny enough, that same summer when I started doing that, I was the county champ from right here in Broward County. So you've been here long enough. South Florida is a pretty high level place. So I was a top long jumper in Broward County in middle school. And it's like, I was already athletic, but the things I learned, so my mindset was like, that's an extreme, I guess. Like, not everyone was going to do that or will do that. But it's like, the simplest point is understanding that if you mess up, there is a way to overcome it that could look as simple as just try again, or be more intricate as read a dissertation on plyometric training and performance. Now, that, like I said, that's extreme, but my mindset was always, don't take it to heart. It's just, there's another way I can do this. And that's how I guess it developed me myself. I had some good coaches, I could say, through the years, but I had some not so good coaches who didn't understand. But I always said, okay, if he's saying, Nick, you messed up, F you this, cussed me out, I'll just be like, all right, got it. Let me go figure this out either right now in the meantime, like what I got to do. Or after this game, stay in it, then go back to the drawing board and get better. And next time you see me at practice or the next game, it'll be leveled up. That was my mindset. So that's how I got through, I guess, my athletic defects or whatever.
And do you think that's something that you had to learn or something that is just like how you are?
I think it's both 50-50, only because we all have a predisposition to some level of like initiative, innovation. I'm a firm believer that every skill we have, whether it be physical, psychological, emotional, whatever it is, social, can be improved. It's just where do you start? And I use an analogy. Let's use LeBron James. He's 6'9", 250 pounds of solid muscle, jump out the gym, great basketball player. Now, I'm using him as an extreme because you could argue those bare traits of him being that big and that athletic did most of the work. I would say yes and no. That's why I say 50-50, because there's other 6'9" people built just like him who didn't make it. And if they did make it, they didn't do what he did. So then you got to argue there's another part of this. So that's why I would say like there is an innate physical and mental baseline that we all have, but it can be improved. Now, some ceilings are lower than others. Like some ceilings might be this high, and once they get there, that might be their capacity. Some ceilings might be this high, but I would argue most humans on this earth do not even try hard enough to even get halfway to their ceiling. Let's be real. Most people will die off this planet and probably not even got to a tenth of the level of their ceiling. Not because they don't want to, but they don't know how to. So that goes to the other side of your question is they have to actively learn this stuff too. So you have to have that baseline, like, can I even do it? Which we all can to some degree, might not be the highest, but then you got to go on your own initiative and figure out, okay, how do I get there? That could be hiring a coach, a trainer, a psychologist, whatever it is, you got to figure it out or do it on your own. That's harder, but it's still doable.
Right. That's definitely true. Because I mean, I don't know, because I've definitely met some athletes where they just naturally have it. Like anything that they try, they can naturally do it. But thinking back to why they can actually do it is because they're always around it. Like that's the environment they're in. That's what they've seen. Like that's what they've been learning from. But then it does take an extra drive to be like, okay, I'm going to do it. You know, to know something and then utilize it are two completely different things on two completely different scales. And it does take both of them like coming together to make it happen and to be amazing.
What's interesting, every natural athlete we can think of through the history of modern sports, I guarantee you all of them, or most of them, I won't say all, I don't know, but most played multiple sports. So that might be a part of it too, because take using LeBron James, Tom Brady, Roger Federer. There's so many of these guys you can name that are considered great in whatever respect of sport. Almost all of them played multiple things. And I think that's why when you say they're natural, they only appear natural because, like you said, they're exposed to these diverse training protocols. So they get bits and pieces that help them in other sports. So I would argue the natural does exist. It does. But the worst thing to a natural is to say they don't work. So that's why it's like the ones that fizzle out are the ones who didn't have that diversity of training, diversity of experience. Because let's be real, most people who fizzle out is literally always because they didn't put in the work. I know it's cliche, but they didn't put in the work. So it's like, I was all American in high school. Guess what? At college, almost everyone was all something, all state, all county, all America, all world. So it's like, you're not special. So you be able to dunk on 5'7" JV freshmen in high school and you're 6'10", that won't fly when the guy you're playing at Duke or wherever big school, he's 6'10" or he's 7'2". What you gonna do now? So that natural stuff I feel is dangerous because there's a lot of coaches who will coddle those kids and actually make them become more of that like lazier or entitled athlete. Because every year, hey, this is my best guy, or he's going to the league. Like you hear that for 15 years, you're probably going to start believing it. So it's a slippery slope, I think.
And it's like, you know, there's no guarantee. Like you do, like you said, have to be in the diversity of it all. Because if you think about it, even like sports train different things, like mentally, physically, you know, and I think that it goes back to what we were saying earlier, like why athletes and entrepreneurs go hand in hand, because that diversity, that mindset that, okay, well, I'm going to compete with myself before, like I have a drive to keep going. I have a drive to keep working on X, Y, and Z, whether it's the physical aspect of sports and winning a game or the entrepreneurial aspect of, okay, creating this event or making this amount of money, reaching whatever success you portray. Success. I'm going to start doing that in real life too, every time I say success. But what was it like for you, like transitioning from being an athlete to going into your entrepreneurial side?
See, I'm a bad example of these things because I'm an outlier in these, because I was not the typical athlete who was like, I loved it, don't get me wrong, but it's like, it wasn't like everything to me, if that makes sense. Like,
Right.
I definitely was a go-getter in sports. I definitely worked hard. I trained my butt off. I did extra even after practice, but I wasn't married to it. So there's a term I got to figure, because I've talked about this on numerous podcasts. I got to figure out who said it. I heard it years ago. It said an athlete dies twice. So what I added to that, I love adding to quotes because I just like creating stuff, but it said the athlete dies twice. So I added, so we got to get ready for the first funeral. And a lot of people don't get ready for that first funeral as the athlete death. We get ready for the real funeral, sadly, but that's life, right? That's actual death. But we don't get ready for the athlete's funeral, meaning what do you get prepared for when that career is over? It could be high school. 99.7% is high school. Another 0.2% is going to be college. And after that, eventually you're going to end your pro career. So if you were that 0.2% to make it pro, even that's going to end. It might be 2 years, might be 10 years, might be like Brady or whoever like that, 20 years, but it's going to end. And using Brady, he's a perfect example of, I think, a bad association with athletic identity, because while he's a great athlete, he didn't really want to give up the game. I'm not saying it cost him his marriage, but I feel it played a role. So yeah, so me going back to your main question is, I got over it because I wasn't that married to it to the point that it became who I am. It was what I was. I was an athlete as a act, but I wasn't an athlete as an identity. Like, I know it sounds contradictory, but I feel that balance is hard to find. And I was fortunate because my parents, they pushed me so much in things that weren't sports. Sport was just an extra thing. So that's why for me, like I said, I'm a bad example because I adjusted very easily. Like when my career ended in college, no more, I was like, first thing I said was, I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. How many guys or girls too that don't do that? I would say that's the majority. And I think when we start telling these young athletes from even high school level is, you can do this, have it to be a vehicle, but don't think it's your end all be all, because guess what? Put your eggs in one basket, they all get broken. Now what are you going to do? And I think I actually have a friend, I'll use him, I won't use his name, but he was a top tier athlete and he had a time struggling because for most of his life, he told me, he confided in me and said, I don't know what else I've been good at, because, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not saying don't be athletic, don't enjoy it, do that. But it's almost disheartening and sad to hear these young people who have never been told. I feel that's what I take from what he told me, and any other athlete goes through this, is that's sad that people don't look at you more than just that, because you are more than that, right? So it's like, I was fortunate. Like I said, my parents, they were the opposite. They were like, okay, you can do sports, but they wanted me to do academic stuff. They wanted, like, that helped me, but not everyone. I'm realistic that everyone's not getting that treatment. It's usually the opposite, because especially if you go into even the Black community, that's often seen as the out, right? That boy gonna make it. He fast, or he can jump, or he can throw. And I'm not mad at that. If that can get you a better life, do it. But we also need to say, but are you good at math, or are you good at creativity? Are you good, whatever? Because guess what? That skill's gonna last them forever. And they get it off my rant. Like, I feel that helped me. So we just start pushing this more, and I try to do it myself as much as I can. Obviously, I have a reach, but I'm only one person. So it's like, we start telling these kids, you can be more than just an athlete. Just use it as a vehicle to your endeavor, but don't let it be the only car you own.
Right, correct. And I had a similar upbringing where my parents were more focused on school, and like athlete, it was definitely an extracurricular that I did, right? And I think that being an athlete, it was kind of hard for me to give up just the fact that like there wasn't as much structure. Like when I was an athlete, my coaches were super neurotic. Whenever we had like a meet or had like a competition, I got like an itinerary and you had to be everywhere at a certain time. You got chosen. You didn't get to choose what you got to wear. Like you had to wear a certain thing. You had to be there at a certain time. You had to eat what was being told you were going to eat. If you got per diem money, then you only had a certain amount you can spend. You can only go a certain distance around. You have to be at bed at a certain time. You have to wake up at a certain time, right? Like there was no more structure after being an athlete. So even though my parents did implement like, okay, well, you are not only an athlete, like there's more to you than athletics. Like you can do something else. I think I was definitely coddled as an athlete because I didn't have to use my brain for what I was going to do, right? Because it was already planned for me. Like practice is scheduled out to the minute. Like we go on trips, every minute is scheduled out. Maybe you have an hour of downtime when you get back, but like it's not too much free time. Our coach even went as far as taking our phones away. When we were at meets before our meet day, she was like, no outside contact, right? But those are the things, one, that made us good as a team because we were focused and knew what we had to do. But then when it comes down to the individual side, it's like it took away part of personality because I didn't get to choose, you know? So transitioning into being an entrepreneur, I'm like, okay, well, I have all these skills because I know how to be on time. I know how to communicate. I know how to set a schedule. I know what it's supposed to look like. But it was weird without as much, one, guidance, and two, support.
That's a great explanation because I don't think that gets talked about enough either, how that structure changed. And you know what's funny about this, make another parallel, and this going back to what I said way earlier about being able to take other clients, other demographics. So I had a guy who's ex-military. He was a Navy SEAL actually, and they're considered top of the top, right? And he said the same thing because when he got out, and he says a lot of people get like this when they, not just Navy SEALs, but just people who leave the military because it's the same structure. You have a set time to get up, set time to eat, set amount of money, set time of when you can blink. So it's like you get into the world now, go live, because there's a big homeless population of vets. And it's like, not saying athletes and vets have the same hindrances in life, but that carryover is there. And that's perfect point because if it's going back to the athlete, if this is what these guys are going through, these military people are going through, and this is what athletes are going through, this must be a big deal, but people don't see it the same. I'm not saying to belittle either or, but it's like, we should start looking in that more because you're snatching away a lifestyle that these students and these athletes have had probably for at least 10 to 15 years. That's a long time. And saying, all right, go live in the world as, I won't say a regular person, but you are a little different. You're not better, but you are different. Any athlete who's watching this, and don't take it, no offense if you're not an athlete, you've never been a high level athlete, it's just different. You're not the same because most people wouldn't adhere to that kind of structure. All in all, the fact that people don't understand that you are getting prepared for a sport and it gets you prepared for life, and this dynamic that you're lame or you don't do anything fun is crazy because like those same people are probably looking at you like you're killing the game, right? So they didn't understand that, and it's like getting sent out into the world after this, like you said, it's just giving them a carpet pulled from under their feet, and it's like maybe there should be like a class or something where every senior athlete or athlete that's entering a draft, maybe 1 hour a week for 6 weeks. It doesn't be anything crazy. That could be something that's like an exit. Because you kind of do that with other courses in your major, right? You have to do a district or a thesis or something like that. So why not athletes have something so they get eased out, and it's almost like a taste test of different careers or different things they can get into that maybe with their major, maybe with their sport, maybe a combination. That's what I did. I found a way to mix everything I love and make a business out of it. So I don't know.
Right. And I completely agree because there's so many different realms that you can go into post athletic career in the athletic realm as well. Like it's not all just being an athlete. There's so many different programs that are implemented by even like college athletic programs or even like club athletic programs. There's so many things that you can do.
Yeah, so I think we covered a lot of things. We really hit a lot of good points, I think. And these are things I feel, whether you're a business owner, entrepreneur, just everyday life, these are things you should consider because I'm big on putting this stuff into practice. We talk about psychology, mental health all day, but no one ever really goes into the actual things we need to know. It's about education, I believe. It's not all about, mindfulness and all that. That's great. Learn those techniques, learn the box breathing, learn the self-talk skills. I'm for that too. But we need to learn actually the concepts so we can make sense of it. And I always say, get your mind right. So
I agree. It's important to know the whys and not just the how to fix it.
Exactly. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So I guess this is pretty cool. We gotta do this again sometime. I think this could be some.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And we'll catch you guys later.